I think we can start. I have today as my topic becoming more compassionate, because obviously, uh, going through this whole process that we keep discussing on each one of our meetings, and today is, by the way, meeting number 28. Oh, and I want to remind you, Wednesday next week, so that is the 27th, no meeting because I will still be traveling on my way back home. But this week we do Wednesday, Friday, and then next week we do Monday and Friday. So this business of becoming more compassionate isn't something I've been thinking about just now with, the pandemic. It's something I've been thinking about for a long time because it's not easy. Being more compassionate doesn't mean feeling more pity or feeling more sad about, people in the world who have difficult circumstances, but it means especially being able to feel compassion towards people that you perhaps find very difficult in your personal life, in your circumstances, even if they're not personal friends. They can be co-workers or neighbors or anything along those lines, but especially, of course, our families, or friends who can irritate us. And think, how difficult is it to feel compassion in a moment of impatience, irritation, resentment, etc. So learning how to be more compassionate with healthy boundaries. So, this has nothing to do with letting go of your healthy boundaries, but learning to be more compassionate means that all these things that we've been talking about in all of these meetings regarding how to have better energy in order to be part of what lifts the global energy, is going to be very necessary. Because if you are unable to feel compassion, or let's say if you are unwilling to move in the direction of feeling compassion, even when what you would like to do is give them a good kick. I, I know I've felt that many times. And since I've been working on this, it is in those moments where I say to myself, oh, this is where you're supposed to be feeling compassion. I don't want to feel compassion. Yes, this is where you're supposed to be feeling compassion. Okay, so then you have this dialogue with yourself where, you may not get anywhere near achieving it in that moment, but you're moving in that direction because you're having this dialogue. And you are not giving in to the part of you that goes the default route of, at least mentally, giving this person a good kick. Even if you say nothing, even if you manage to hold on to your words, but inside of you, that energy that is not compassionate and that is resentful, hateful, angry, you name it, is the energy that is going to lower your contribution to the global energy as opposed to raise it. And so, like so many other things, the best you can do is work at it continually, consistently, whenever situations of this kind appear in your life. And I know in my own life, when I started working on this very consciously, some really badass situations entered my life, as if to say to me, here's where you can work on it. And you do, you like I say, you may fail many times because you're not feeling anything close to compassion, but at least you're having the dialogue. And that is the beginning of these important steps that I think we have to take if this is the road we're interested in moving forward on. So this, by the way, is a subject I've talked about on a couple of occasions in the group, when the group was meeting in my house. And I I used to start it out by saying things like, practice, for example, when you're walking down the street and you pass by someone, and maybe the someone you pass by doesn't even look at you, or they look lost in thought, or maybe they look sad, and you might try to give them a smile, but they haven't noticed you, so of course the smile is of no use in the sense of them having seen it. But what you can do in your head, you can say bless you, but you can also say bless you on all those occasions where you might want to say fuck you. And the bless you is your way of trying to move in this new direction. It's like, sometimes I tell of a time in my life where, things were really looking bad and terrible. And I, because of things I had read about what happens when you smile, even if it's a fake smile, I would practice smiling against my will when I was really feeling anything but smiling. Say, well, I was in the car. I would make these faces. I could see myself in the rearview mirror. I looked so fake, but I could feel, because this is what happens. There are chemicals that are released when you move those muscles that you employ while you are smiling. I could feel a portion, at least, of the way I felt lifting, minutely maybe, but as I did it more and more, despite the way I was feeling, it had a greater and greater impact. So with this business of saying bless you, even when you want to say the exact opposite inside your head, it doesn't have to be anything you say out loud. So this is a way of moving yourself into that direction of becoming more compassionate and changing your neural pathways to make that your go-to reaction, as opposed to the other one, or your default reaction, right? And so, of course, when you're saying bless you, it's not just the beggar that you're saying this to, but also whom you would feel sorry for, right? We find it easy to feel sorry for the beggar, or for the poor people in countries where they're starving, or where there is a war, or where people have become refugees. That is relatively easy for us to feel, and we can, in a relatively easy way, say bless you in our minds, but not so much when we are faced with these people that create negative feelings in us, or low energy feelings. So the bless you is a way of moving in that other energetic direction. And so, of course, what you're doing is you're letting love guide you, or your intention of love guide you, instead of this other stuff that you might be feeling. Not only that, as you do it, because of the neural pathways that are involved, you acquire the habit of doing so. And you begin to become much more attuned to that kind of energy. Then, of course, remember, we are all one. We've talked about this many, many times. We are all one. There are many quantum physicists and people who've worked with energy on a very scientific level, Einstein, for example, who spoke of this field of unity. And that implies that there is something energetically that connects all of us. This is no longer news or something that people haven't heard about. But if we are all one, then if I say in my head something bad to you or about you because of this reaction I'm having, I'm actually saying it to myself too, you see? So the compassion that you are able to show out there, or to think out there, or to intend out there, is a compassion that also will reflect on you. And when you start doing this, you have to remember that the feelings that arise in you due to another person's words or actions, those feelings are yours. Okay, this is the place where a lot of people get stuck. No, no, no. He said, she said, he did, she did. And therefore, my feelings are their fault because they did, they said. You see? And of course, it's not so. Yes, they did, they said. Whatever they did, they said. But your feelings are still your own responsibility. So life is throwing you this little gift with these feelings that you are noticing. Remember, I said one day about Jung having said, any kind of affect, any kind of emotion, and especially the negative ones, are like little red flags. And so, of course, as they arise, you're meant to be paying attention to them if you're conscious and aware of what's going on inside of you. And while you may not wish to acknowledge that this is your responsibility, because after all, he said, she said, or he did, she did, whatever they did, this is your responsibility from the point of view of what you now do with those feelings and how you regulate your thoughts about them as you go through the process of learning how to react differently than the way you might have been reacting in the past. And of course, a portion of that has to do with compassion. And when your intention is to be compassionate, even if you don't yet quite manage it, at least you're moving in the right direction. But you've got to remember that your feelings are your own. And so please, I want to reiterate, because I say this all the time, but remember that whatever is being said or done out there, it could be that your boundaries are being trespassed. Now, you're not supposed to allow anybody to trespass those boundaries, but you are supposed to be in charge of your reaction. So there's a very fine line here to understand. Let's say you are my husband or my wife, and every day when we meet in the evening after our respective jobs, you come home and you are upset because, whatever happened to you during your day at work, and you start shouting. I've asked you many times not to shout, but you continue to shout. So now, healthy boundaries mean that there have to be consequences, or you may wish to, be very clear about what will happen if the shouting continues. But the way you say it and the way you handle it, that is the part where you are responsible. So yes, don't allow those boundaries to be trespassed, but at the same time, be very aware of the fact that you will not grow towards self-regulation, nor will you grow towards emotional maturity, nor will you grow towards greater spiritual growth and understanding unless you learn how to be in charge of the way you say these things. That's a huge part of the growth lesson. And the quicker you learn it, the better life will be for you. You see, because as long as there are strong reactions to whatever is going on in your outer world, you are enslaved by whatever other people say or do. And of course, getting to the place of compassion is nearly impossible. And but so we've talked many times, maybe not in these Zoom meetings, but in the past in other meetings, about the fact that you always have a choice. And so in this bless you business, right, you have the choice to intend it. Remind yourself, I am intending to grow in compassion. So I can intend to say bless you, even if I want to say the exact opposite. And I feel anything but like blessing you. But I intend this. And the reason I intend this is because I want to grow in compassion. So, you have to take the steps. My 6-year-old grandson, who is, just about there with reading and so on, he obviously, just as we all did, had to go through the steps in order to learn how to read. We know this. I don't know if you guys remember how you learned how to read. I really remember it very well. And I remember the thrill I had when I was learning it, and how much it meant to me to be able to come home and look at my books from, I learned to read in English, but my books were in German because we had just moved to Canada. And I realized, oh man, I can read these books. And probably my mind didn't say, despite the fact that they're in German, but I realized that these books that my mom and dad used to read to me, I could now read. So this process of going through a step-by-step movement towards compassion, towards the intention of compassion, it has to be learned. You didn't learn how to read by sitting down in your desk one day and the teacher saying to you, okay, now you can read. Obviously, it didn't work that way. Nor will you become compassionate just by saying to yourself, yes, I wish to be compassionate. You have to truly go through steps and everyday practice and intend and recognize that you have failed miserably, but at least you keep reminding yourself this is the direction in which you want to go. And of course, letting love guide you in the process towards compassion, you have to let go of being right. Even if I'm right, do I have to prove it to you? Do I have to argue with you and maybe even put you down to show you how right I am? I don't mean something like, the capital of a country is a given city. Okay, we all know this, and if you don't know it, I can prove it to you by going to an encyclopedia or Google or you name it. But what about voting for one political party as opposed to another one? Why am I right? Or why is my religion right and yours is not? Or why is it right to invest this way and not that way? So you see these other arenas, or what age should a child be allowed to have a mobile phone? And on and on and on and on. So do I have to be right? Or can I simply allow your opinion to stand? I'm always amazed by online comments in social media across the board, whether it's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, et cetera, where people get so inflamed about one person's opinion and the way they then react to this. Why can we not simply allow another person's opinion to stand? Anyway, so letting go of being right. Also letting go of the ego, the part of you that insists so much and so frequently and so loudly that it knows better than you. So my ego is the part of me that, let's say I'm yelling at you. And let's say you're my, husband, wife, daughter, parent, best friend, sibling. And I'm yelling at you because I got really angry. And while I'm yelling at you, there's a part of me that says, why are you doing this? This isn't nice. This isn't the way to behave with someone that you love. So the part of me that is saying that to me is the part of me that is not the ego. And the part of me that is yelling, despite this voice in my head, is my ego, because my ego has to prove to you how wrong you are, or how bad you are, or how inconsiderate you are, or how whatever bad thing, right, you are. And so that ego section is a huge topic, and there has been so much written about it, but it's really important to be aware of it. What is your ego and what is really you? Anyway, there is a whole lot more in this arena, but I want to talk a little bit more about something different here. So around the time that I formed the Live Your Best Life group, back in, I think it was February of 2010. So that's 10 and a half years ago, even though we had a hiatus of a year and something. Part of the reason I formed it was because so many things had come together to show me serendipitously. I had seen different documentaries, I had read different books, but that had kind of fallen into my hands within a very short period of time back in, you know, late 09 and early 2010. And they were all things that kind of said or had the same message. We are all one. And yet such terrible things happen in the world, despite the fact that we are all one. And this is what those documentaries were kind of about. And if you're ever interested in what they were, I'd be happy to share with you. But anyway, at that time, and I wrote a blog article about this, as all those pieces came into my life, with all their horror, pain, tragedy, outrage, and suffering, I had to ask myself, what can I do? And then I read a quotation from the Buddha that I've read many times before. If there is light in the soul, there is beauty in the person. If there is beauty in the person, there will be harmony in the house. If there is harmony in the house, there will be order in the nation. If there is order in the nation, there will be peace in the world. And so, of course, it showed me all you really have to do is find your inner light and let it shine. And so I began the group with that kind of thought and purpose in mind. And here we are in the midst of this pandemic. But so this and compassion are closely linked. The more you are able to feel compassion, the more this light is able to shine through you. Yes, we keep talking about raising the energy of on a global level. And but then now let's talk a little bit about compassion and detachment. A lot of people have said to me, so how do you, listen to people so many times a day that tell you their stories, which in many instances are terrible stories? I said, well, I kind of do something that the Buddhists talk about a lot, which is I practice compassionate detachment. And compassionate detachment, we could define as the manner in which we relate to others when we allow them to deal with their own problems, and they are therefore free to choose to become responsible for their own issues, while simultaneously we express a loving concern for the nature of their current predicament, and also simultaneously we are not invested in the outcome. This is simply, this thing I've just read is a compilation of many definitions of the expression compassionate detachment that I found over the years and that made the most sense to me. So I've used the example of starving children many times in the past. If I see a documentary or even just a photo in an article, which you can look for or find without looking for it almost any day of the week, every year, every decade, somewhere in the world there are starving children, malnourished, terrible things of children. Anyway, so you say to yourself, okay, what can I do here? But at the beginning, you might just want to cry because of your pain at what is happening to these poor children. And so, sure, you can maybe, very few people would be able to go and work with an NGO in some third world country, or even work with an NGO in our Western countries in their, organization, administration, and so on and so forth. Some people would be able to donate money or volunteer in a grassroots way. All of those methods are good ways of trying to move the situation in a better direction. But of course, most of us can't actually do that. And so therefore, because we already have our jobs, we already have our lives the way they are, and we can't enter into those particular ways of helping. So, what do you do with your feelings, and how do you apply compassion in that moment? Well, first of all, you've got to detach. And the detachment is more, I would say, from your first from your feelings, because of course your feelings come from great inner pain, partially because you can't do anything directly and you can't be Mother Teresa, and partially because just watching something like that is terrible. So let's kind of push that away, because that is, after all, I'm going to say, a selfish way of looking at it. A selfish way because I'm giving in to my feelings about what is happening there. And my feelings are valid. Of course they are. But that doesn't help. And then think, this negative load of very sad feelings, or maybe even guilty feelings, that I'm not doing anything to assuage and improve the situation of these starving children, this negative load is not helping the greater energy of the world. So one of the things I can do is work on my own, as we've been saying over and over again, on my own inner equanimity and harmony. In other words, on my self-regulation. I can also work on my compassion. Now, this goes way beyond bless you. Of course, it's also bless you to those children. But it is about recognizing that I can do much more for them, thinking about how I uh, can visualize their plight improving, by which I'm not trying to imply that I believe magically you visualizing it means that their plight will improve, but you improve the energy. And by improving yourself on this energetic level, you once again improve the um, global energetic barometer, if you like. And as I keep repeating, oh, if enough of us do this, there has to be a different world. And why isn't it possible that enough of us do this? It's merely not possible if not enough do it, right? So if I do it and you do it and he does it and she does it, then bit by bit, these things change. And there is more, there is a greater possibility for this higher energetic frequency on a global level to bring other kinds of people into office, to have a smaller amount of people who are only focused on power, money, position, and those kinds of things, as opposed to a greater equality in all things, in distribution of wealth, but certainly in things like education, food, healthcare, right? Anyway, so this working on your own inner compassion, even when it is for something as difficult as seeing starving children, is a huge step in exercising something that doesn't necessarily come easily to us. So let's see. I want to also mention that let's say I am faced with a friend, and I've had lots of arguments about this subject. I mean, in the sense of people coming to me and arguing the point, not me arguing in the sense of trying to, no, I'm right and you're wrong. But people find it hard to accept this particular point. So let's say you have a friend who is terminally ill or has just had a terminal diagnosis, and your reaction is to either feel so sad and so terrible about what is happening to them that you bring all your sad and hence negative energy into their field as you come to comfort them. But you come with this tone of voice um, that shows how much you care, but really it shows how much you are not thinking. Do you see what I'm saying? You're not thinking because you're not paying attention to the fact that you are lowering their energy by having lowered your own. Okay, so therefore, or the other thing you might want to do is to step in and rescue. So you might have heard of an alternative treatment, or you might have, or you might want to, get them to see a documentary or hear a book. I mean, if they're asking you for this kind of thing, that's different. But you may, enter with your rescue mode or your very sad, loving friend mode. Neither of those is necessarily the most positive thing you can do. And this is where I get some of the arguments, I get it. I mean, hey, but what is really, at least in Buddhist thought, what is really required is that you detach from the outcome. And if you detach from the outcome, one of the things that you can do is, of course, assuming they are open to it, continue to behave with them as though they are your friend and not a label of your now tragically, terminally ill friend. You see the difference? And of course, your friend may wish to discuss the illness, in which case, please, discuss it. But your friend may prefer that you continue to talk about all those subjects that you always used to talk about, football or books or opera or tennis, which isn't happening, is it, right now? And let them continue to enjoy their life in this fashion. So compassionate detachment is a very important concept, I think, not just for people like me who work in the so-called, some people say service industry, some people say healing fields, but it's also important for every single person who's out there. Anyway, so let's have a quick chat. If anybody has any thoughts about this subject.